Let's take a look at the headlines. Google is to invest $10 billion in Anthropic today, and then another $30 billion to follow if Anthropic hits performance milestones. This will give Google a significant stake in Anthropic, based on a $380 billion valuation. Mike, is this just more of the same circular financing we've been seeing in the tech and AI space?
That's one way that you could look at it because I know that Anthropic and Google have partnered, and there's a lot of pressure on Anthropic to find more compute. So this could be one way to do that. But I think it's actually a very interesting strategic move by Google because many people look at that and say, well, why are you investing in your competitor? Because Claude is a competitor, a direct competitor to Gemini. Well, one of the reasons you do that strategically, it's called embedding optionality. Actually, the investment itself is embedding optionality. I buy a stake right now for 10 billion, and then I have the right, if you meet metrics, to invest another 30 billion and increase my stake. The reason you may want to do that, and it's a similar logic with Microsoft and OpenAI, is you have the option in the future to maybe escalate to a purchase, to buy what is a competitor and take it off the market. So that's called an optionality. I have the option to do it, but not the obligation to do it. It's a very interesting strategic move because you would think, right? And I'm going to emphasize this again, that they're actually competing, but you hinted at the fact that actually Anthropic needs Google's access to customers. It's using its cloud at the same time that maybe Gemini and Claude are supposedly competing. And one of the things I want to harken back to is, we mentioned this on a previous episode, it's not actually clear that Gemini and Claude, Opus, or Sonnet are directly competing exactly for the same segments, because I think Google has focused more on image and creativity and maybe more of a B2C crowd. And it's quite clear that Anthropic's going into B2B. And if you remember that, Google may also want to get into B2B more than it currently is. And partnering with Anthropic, with Microsoft on the other side, makes a hell of a lot of sense. So out of that, what looks like on the surface a confusing investment makes a lot of sense if you start to dig down into the causes behind it, potential causes.
And I know Google has been coming after Microsoft's UCC, which is, Teams, voice, that kind of thing, that business for a while now. And so this doesn't surprise me at all, leveraging Anthropic, who's big in enterprise already, to get their foot more in that door. I wanted to call out a couple stats here. Microsoft owns approximately 27% of OpenAI. Amazon owns 15 to 19% of Anthropic. Meta owns 49% of Scale AI. And just on a whim, I looked up how much GCC countries, that's Gulf Coast countries, have invested in American AI and tech in the past year. I don't know. I just thought it was interesting that GCC has invested over $131 billion in
But
US
why? We're
research.
going to come to, why would they do that? Lots of space to put stuff.
Lots of space. And
Lots of
there's
space to put data centers, etc. A lot of oil money to spread around.
lots of hype. Yeah.
A lot of hype. Yeah.
Interesting. I thought that was just an interesting stat. All right, let's move on here to the next one. I want you guys to listen to a story real quick, very quick. Imagine that you receive an email from a reporter named Michael Chen. He's seeking comment on a news story. It's going to be published on his news site called The Wire by Acutus. Only after some research do you find that Michael Chen is actually an AI agent, and the entire news site he works for, or it works for, is written by AI and edited by AI. And it's not a sci-fi novel, it's reality. Michael Nichols, what does this mean for the future of journalism?
I don't know. Let me play a contrarian position. I'll let you respond. What's the problem with it? So let's imagine you're in a newsroom right now, and lots of the newsrooms, the business model is completely broken. Look at Washington Post. Look at many of the others. We could keep citing them, right? The newsrooms are really struggling.
Yeah.
Even when Bezos, this magician, takes over it, they're struggling like hell. CBS is struggling. They're all struggling, with the exception probably of New York Times. At this point, New York Times for me is a gaming app, right? So
Yeah.
that's a context you got to think about out there. You were hinting at a different direction, but I wanted to put that context out there. maybe AI could be used as a way to cut the cost in the newsroom. And one of the clever things I think they did with this Michael Chen, where I don't really have much of a problem, using an AI agent to go out and collect quotes, that's actually quite smart, right? And well, provided people answer it. Now, is it ethical? Do you declare that Michael
Mm.
Chen is an AI agent? That's another question you might want to think about. And then when it comes to writing, there's this Puritan atmosphere around writing where most people are like, if it's not a human, you can't do it, right? That's just off limits, completely off limits if it's not a human. That's not journalism. I don't know. I see the argument there, but some of the deeper problems weren't really that for me, that maybe it's just an AI generating text. A lot of actual journalists are getting caught using AI as well to generate articles. The deeper thing is who's paying for this thing, right? Because it looked like in the end, it's like a shell company to promote pro AI and become an attack dog against people who are raising AI skeptics. Let's just say it that way.
You hit a lot of good notes there. My take on it is that it's inevitable. Like we're gonna get there where this is kind of the new
Yeah.
norm for our day to day news. I don't think they're gonna replace the Katie Courics of the world, but our day to day news cycle, I absolutely do think it's gonna happen. Now, my issue with this is it's not transparent. So there's no clear intent of journalistic integrity on the site. If it is written by AI, it wouldn't be nice to have a disclosure, in my opinion. And then these are the things that we do to maintain a journalistic level of integrity. There's a couple terms. There's something called pink slime news, and then something called news mirage that this kind of falls into with this particular site that we're talking about, the Acutus, the Wire by Acutus. It seems to be very targeted at certain agendas and political philosophies, and pushing the agenda that it wants to push. And that's something that's, and it's passed off as real news. And it might be real news, but it's definitely slanted, right? And that's
But
something
hey,
called
how many NGOs and PACs are out there
yeah.
doing the same thing, packaging it up as fact finders or misinformation finders, but they're actually
Yeah.
pushing a line. I think an interesting graphic to bring up would be, and this will be a race maybe to the bottom. Who can lose trust in journalism the fastest? Actual journalists? Because if you look at trust in media
Yeah.
over the last 30 years, which I believe correlates with the explosion of social media, in alternative news, alternative fact finding, fact interpretation, etc., or having your own truth, your own perspective, my truth, right? Which will get to the bottom faster? Would it be Acutus or the traditional industry who's kind of, smeared its own self?
Be a close race. My bet is those AI robots that ran marathons in China.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
All
Well, they
right.
kind of they stumbled right at the starting line, right? And
Yeah,
then
the one who won
shredded
had to be picked
themselves.
up, but it's whatever.
Yeah. Well,
All
that's
right.
kind of what the news has kind of done that. It's like a self-own, right? A big self goal, right? Own goal.
I think they're going to make it, unfortunately. All right. So DeepSeek, the Chinese open source AI model, has released two new flagship versions this week, V4 Flash and V4 Pro. DeepSeek itself states that these models put DeepSeek 3 to 6 months behind US frontier models. Mike, that's a bold statement for an open source model that you can download and self host.
Yeah, and remember we talked about the massive valuations around Anthropic was 380, projecting forward OpenAI around 800 plus, right? Somewhere in that range. I don't know the specific number, but I would be worried if I'm them. And the main reason is you're going everywhere to get more and more compute. You need more and more power to develop these models. And there's a hint, at least I think from the White House this week and previously, that certain foreign powers are stealing the models, right? Or the technology or the IP behind it. Now, we don't know if that's true. I also said this on a previous episode. you can just put a pile of cash in front of workers at a company and your IP will walk right out the door. It happens every day
Yeah.
in every corporate around the world. There's corporate espionage the world over. I knew a guy in a university, I won't say his name. That was his job. It was called intelligence, right? Corporate intelligence, business intelligence. The guy went around, he had this really thick Alabama accent, and he told me the easiest way to get information from people is, besides like the honeypot stuff and compromising people, was just to get them to start talking. And the way he did it was to disarm them with this accent. And so they thought he was dumb because he sounds Southern. And
Hmm.
then he would just ingratiate himself like, oh, Jason, you're an expert at Anthropic. That's a really prestigious institution. Everyone knows you as an expert. Tell me about your work. It sounds glamorous. And then step by step, people love to complain. And then when they start complaining, you start to understand the real world they're working in. And then that's how he would elicit information from people. So it's stealing is the implied term out there. But it's not clear that that's what's going on. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But if it is, tell me how the consumer is not benefiting from that, right? I mean, that's the other side. Because when I look on X, people are like, oh yeah, DeepSeek. Why would you ever pay for Claude, by the way? Now, if you can have basically the same, and your biggest competition, good enough. If this is good enough, self-hosted, to get the job done, why pay the $200 or more for compute every month? That's just for, the Claude Pro. You might have to pay even more if you're using the API. Why do that? And that's a big ass threat for those private models. And who knows why the White House is saying that? What's going on in the background? Do people hold positions in those companies? Are they being fed the information? I don't know.
Who knows on that front? What I do know, though, is that AI sovereignty and really tech sovereignty in general, there's been a big pushback around Huawei tech here in the States. I know from telecom that we had to remove tons of Huawei equipment because they were edge routers, switches, that type
Yeah.
of thing. And they've had to all be removed from US infrastructure.
And in Europe too. I mean,
Yeah.
even, countries like the Netherlands, they basically kicked them out when they found similar
Yeah.
things, right?
Yeah. So sovereignty in this space is very important right now. And so I think it's really interesting that DeepSeek is now paired with Huawei and also using chips from Cambricon. I'm not familiar with that company, but they're a Chinese company. What's interesting to me, though, is that they're 3 to 6 months behind our flagship models, our frontier models. OpenAI and Anthropic still outpace it on long context accuracy tests, which is one of the basic reasoning tests that we use for AI. However, a very telling stat is that V4 Pro compute costs less than 15% of what
Yes.
OpenAI and Anthropic compute costs. And then V4 Flash is like 1% of the cost of what those
Yeah.
costs. Crazy.
And this is one of these unintended consequences of geopolitics, perhaps. So when you're putting up tariffs, etc., protectionism to prevent chips from going to China, they're having to depend on local production
Yep.
and finding other ways to reach efficiency. And actually, when you look at China's economy, they're very damn good at that in general,
Yeah.
right? Making the most out of a little and becoming super efficient, super productive, very fast at scale. And that could be one of the unintended consequences because what was cited as the reason for the 6 month lead of the US was simply compute and chips. And I think the release itself was kind of a preview while they gather the compute power to finish it off.
Sure.
I could be wrong. You can check that.
We'll check. Siemens has introduced a successful trial of humanoid robot O1 Alpha. Humanoid's the company. It worked an 8-hour shift, moving 60 containers per hour with a 90% success rate. O1 Alpha was trained on NVIDIA's physical AI stack. Mike, are we cooked? Do you think warehouse jobs are about to be stolen by robots?
I grew up in the European industrial context in my career. The context behind that is Siemens headquarters is in a place called Erlangen, Germany. And Germany is a very, very expensive place to do business. It's highly regulated. The labor laws are very, very strict. The people on the line working in those factories, they're typically going to be represented by a union or a trade union, whatever, worker union, whatever you want to call it. And it's very difficult to lower your cost as a German manufacturer exactly at the time when the Chinese are producing, manufacturing at scale and undercutting you on price everywhere in the world. Maybe not on the very high tech that Siemens in, but they're coming, right? They're coming fast. So the context of why would Siemens do this is, well, when you have so much expensive labor, if you could replace it with capital investments into humanoids, then a few things become easier. It's difficult to get rid of those workers, but maybe some of the safety in the factory, some of the regulatory compliance around that goes down. And essentially, this is just piece picking. The question is 90% good enough? I don't know. But will they get better? What is the standard that they have to reach? I don't know. But some of that context is European manufacturers are getting battered left and right by energy prices, regulation, the standards around AI. So they're kind of like handcuffed in a regulatory environment that causes their costs to be really high. So you can understand very well why they would be interested in humanoid. Yeah, there's a trade-off. What happens to those workers if they're displaced by these humanoids? Is the idea to augment them on the line, make it safer for them, put them in different positions that are maybe better for workers, not standing all day or bleeding eyes from picking and auditing. And so I don't know. It's a interesting question, but I think whenever you see something like that, you got to look at the entire context of what European companies are up against. It is not an easy environment. What's really, I think, refreshing is that often European companies can be slow to innovation, but this is an example of them taking some risk, right? That this is going to get the news, and I guarantee you some politicians will make some comments on that over there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. As far as what I looked at with people or companies who have pilot programs going right now with robotics, BMW has a pilot program
Yeah,
with Figure right now, and
same context.
Mercedes is using the Apollo robots from Apptronik in a pilot program. A couple of other interesting facts tidbits I gathered from this one was for every $100 spent on robotics, 80 of that goes to safety and infrastructure to support the robot and its environment, and only 20 of it's actually on the robot itself. So it's a very high cost proposition right now. The cost is coming down, however. So we'll hit that point eventually where it's worth it. But then technology research advisory firm Gartner states that by 2028, fewer than 100 POC pilot programs will advance beyond experimentation phases. Speculation again, but a pretty credible source in that arena. So I don't know. I think it's coming. I think you're 100% right. We will get there.
It's really no different than the kiosks in McDonald's in the end.
Yeah. Oh,
You
absolutely.
could have the live worker where you have all the regulations around that and the increasing cost, the increasing minimum wages,
Yeah.
or you can capitalize it.
And
And
when you
the
remove,
question is, what's the longevity of these robots? Is it as long as a kiosk? I don't know. I mean, that's the question.
yeah, they're a little bit more complex, so you never know there. But they'll probably have a lot more maintenance costs, that kind of thing. But an interesting tidbit about the kiosks is when you remove the human, fat people like me are liable to buy more McDonald's. So
Yeah,
I'll order two double quarter if I
because
don't
there's
have
no
judgment.
shame.
Yeah, there's no
There's
judgment.
no shame.
Just interesting.
And you can hide. You can hide a little bit until they put the bag up there and then
Like,
go get it, like slyly. Yeah.
you reach up to grab the bag when it's ready. Okay. All right. Multiple studies from moving on. Multiple studies from MIT and Penn have found that AI chatbots could be eroding cognitive abilities in humans who use the AI. Study participants become lazy and experience cognitive surrender, where they prefer to let the AI answer questions instead of actually thinking about it themselves. Okay, so now, not the robots, just AI chatbots in general are going to cook our society, meaning we're done for, right?
Yeah, but they're not doing it. It's the humans actually have to participate in this game. If you're experiencing cognitive decline, it's because you're using AI. Nobody's forcing you to do that. And I'd be interested in having a much broader study because what you probably find is there will be segments where this is truer, right? Where it's more severe. And then there'll be segments where they're using it as a research tool and as an like a sparring partner is the way you would say that. That's kind of how I use it. And then there are others who will never use it, right? I mean, there you can imagine a spectrum of people who will use it too much and then all the way up to use it not at all. What it got me thinking about was schooling a little bit, like academia, because one of the lines in the article there describing it was that kids are complaining while using it a lot that they're getting addicted to it. And that was kind of the behavior I think they witnessed in the study itself, is that it draws you into the point where you progressively outsource more and more to it, where you stop reasoning on your own. Now, you know what's interesting about this is the solution I see online a lot is force people to write, force people to read. That's how you overcome this, right? That's probably true. I roll this back to Homer. You know who Homer was?
Yeah, Odyssey.
Odyssey, and the other one?
Iliad.
The Iliad, right? Do you know how those stories were transmitted from generation to generation?
Verbal.
Verbally. They memorized it. They would have believed, this is what's funny. This is why I always like to have this perspective. They would have believed that writing and reading debilitates your memory. It makes it impossible to memorize the chants. Like they had different chants and tonations that would have to come along with the performance of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And that's all lost, the performance, when you put it down in a book. Even Plato, I think, argues that reading and writing debilitate the mind because they were using, like, maybe it's not Plato, you can look that up, but they're arguing that the way that you learn is by telling stories and engaging in debate and the Socratic method. So I just find that perspective interesting, that the OG, like, the best way to train your brain is don't read and write, you know? And then now it's the best way to train your brain is to read and write. Well, with AI, maybe it's true that you're doing neither of those. You're neither memorizing nor writing, right? Nor reading, right? Yeah. It's not even clear they're reading the output. That was what was funny. They can't even recall what was written because they didn't write it. They're just kind of completely outsourcing it.
Yeah.
I don't know how you overcome that.
I think you're right. It's going to depend. It's going to be a person-on-person basis. It's going to be dependent upon how you use it, how you consume it. I'm going to give you the W on this one because you went to Homer. That was a really good call because I wrote down GPS systems ruined our brains, calculators ruined our brains,
totally.
Spell checkers ruined our brains, right? So like we're...
Hey, you know, with the GPS one, I have intentionally my whole life since we've had that. It's super useful. I can't even recall how brutal it was to pull out a damn map. Yeah. And fathers like me don't want to use a map in the first place. So what I do when I move to a new place is use it when I go to a new place. If I travel there more than one time, I turn it off. And it's simply to train my brain to be more alert on the road and where we're going than just outsourcing it to that.
Yeah.
There's a debate. I guess there would be a debate. Is it safer to have the GPS, the maps on or off? I don't know. Are you more alert with them on or off? And there's some debate that many crashes happen when you're in a routine, when you're going on the same route. So that would be the counter argument to what I'm saying, is that when you got something it's just a routine, you become more careless somehow. You're so used to it, you just go autopilot, and doing something new using the map makes you aware that this is something new. I got to actually pay attention more. I don't know.
Interesting thought. I don't know. We have to look and see if anyone's done some studies on that. If not, we'll see if we can get you some funding, some grant money to go do that. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Looking for my next opportunity. So.
All right.
Hey, you've just watched a clip from Show Your Priors podcast. We hope you liked it. Check out our main channel for full episodes. We're also anywhere podcasts are found. Give us a like, subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, but helps us out a ton. We'll see you back next week.